What is Leo 2.0 all about?
During the election of 2020, Ambassador, I had a conversion. The Democratic Party left me. And in 2020, on the Sean Hannity show, I made the transition from being a Democrat to the Republican Party and a #1 supporter of President Trump.
I suspect you could have had any job you wanted. You chose the DOJ, but then you chose a specific task force to lead within the DOJ, which is all about anti-Semitism.
I've been a civil rights attorney for 35 years. I grew up in the 60s. I know my history. I know that Jewish Americans walked hand in hand with Dr. King, making sure that Black Americans had their civil rights. I am proud to be the Black face of this task force because this is not a Jewish issue. It's an American issue. It's a Western civilization issue.
Welcome to the One Jewish State podcast. My guest is someone that I've long admired, and this introduction may embarrass him a little bit, but it does need to be said. We've had anti-Semitism as a plague on the Jewish people for as long as there have been Jewish people, for 3,500 years. And during the course of our 3,500-year existence, we've had multiple tragedies, and on occasion, I would say on a rare occasion, people have stepped up and stood up for their Jewish brothers and sisters. It is, as I said, all too rare. But when it happens, they become historical figures. We do know who they are. And we have one on the show today, somebody who has gone above and beyond anyone's expectations. Of course, it starts with President Trump, as I'm sure he will tell you, but it really is a function largely of the commitment and the dedication and really the heart of our guest, Leo Terrell. He is the chair of the DOJ task force to combat anti-Semitism. And to say he's done an outstanding job is a massive understatement. He has done things that no one has ever done before. He will be a historical figure in the fight against anti-Semitism, I have no doubt. And that's why I was so delighted and I care so much about getting him on the show. It's my pleasure and delight to introduce Leo Terrell. Leo, thank you so much for being on the show.
Ambassador, first of all, thank you. I'm going to do some deep breathing because that opening statement was so emotional. And I thank you, and thank you for having me on the show.
You're a special person. You really are. And we'll get into that a little bit. And maybe we'll start with, I remember when you used to go on Hannity, which you were a pretty frequent guest, and you were then a legal expert. You provided a lot of great commentary on trials and other cases that were going on. But he referred to you sometimes as Leo 2.0, right? Which struck me. I assumed that meant something about a second version or a transformation that you undertook. What is that all about? What is Leo 2.0 all about?
Well, thank you very much. Let me tell your listeners and your viewers exactly what happened. It was in 2020. And I want to be very clear. I've always been a supporter of Israel and supportive of the Jewish community. But during the election of 2020, Ambassador, I had a conversion. The Democratic Party left me. And in 2020, on the Sean Hannity show, I made the transition from being a Democrat to the Republican Party and a #1 supporter of President Trump. Two key incidents in 2020 that occurred. We had the riots in 2020 when the Democrats decided to support defunding the police, and Joe Biden made one of the most racist statements stating that if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. I've been a civil rights attorney for 35 years. Everyone is equal. No one can tell a group of people how to vote. I became a big Trump supporter, and in the last 6 years, I made the right decision. The Democratic Party is not the party I grew up with, and now I feel very, very comfortable as a supporter of President Trump.
So you were such a strong supporter of President Trump, so effective in making the case for him that when he was elected in 2024, I suspect, and I know the president pretty well. I've known him 25 years. I suspect you could have had any job you wanted. You could have been in the State Department, you could have been in Commerce, you could have been in Treasury. You chose the DOJ, which I suppose makes sense given your civil rights background. But then you chose a specific task force to lead within the DOJ, which is all about anti-Semitism. You know, I have to tell you, most of these jobs get filled by people who are Jewish. I don't know this. I assume you're not Jewish. You took this job and you ran with it. And I guess why? Like why? What was it about this job that appealed to you, given how beloved you were within the Trump administration? You could have done anything. Why this job?
Well, first of all, let me simply say this. President Trump is the greatest president in my lifetime. He is the #1 supporter of Israel and a strong supporter of the Jewish community. Let me answer your question. I've been a civil rights attorney for 35 years. I grew up in the 60s. I know my history. I know that the Jewish community helped start the NAACP in 1909. I'm a child of the 60s. I know that Jewish Americans walked hand in hand with Dr. King, making sure that Black Americans had their civil rights. I'm aware of 2 Jewish activists in 1964 in Mississippi who were murdered, helping Black Americans get their rights. I know my history, and I am proud to be the Black face of this task force because this is not a Jewish issue. It's an American issue. It's a Western civilization issue. And when President Trump gave me the opportunity to head this task force, to work on this goal of eradicating anti-Semitism, I jumped at it. And when people such as yourselves said I've done a lot, I could do more. And I want to do more, and I'm going to do more. This is a crisis, and it's something that I work on 24/7. And my goal is to put me out of business. I hope I can be put out of business before this administration. But let me make one other point before your next question. This time period is critical. As I mentioned, we have the greatest president who support Israel and who support Jewish Americans in this country. We have to put up guardrails now before 2028. I don't think we'll ever have a friend as strong, as committed as Donald J. Trump. He has fire in his belly. I have that same fire to make sure we do everything possible to eradicate anti-Semitism.
Wow. God bless you. God bless you for that. That was now you got me a little bit emotional. I noticed that you were asked about this subject recently, and you said something I thought was profound and something I agreed with, because anti-Semitism doesn't just spout up spontaneously. There are things that make it happen. And you said on TV to a reporter something. Again, I agree with this, that the Biden administration had abandoned the Jewish people for political purposes. It sure felt that way. What did you mean by that?
Well, I'll tell you, when I came to the Department of Justice, I realized that, look, the Department of Justice has the legal tools and weapons to implement deterrent mechanism to stop anti-Semitism. What do I mean by that? You file hate crime charges. You file lawsuits against discrimination under Title VI and Title VII. The Biden administration did nothing. They allowed anti-Semitism to run rampant in this country. You know why? They had the Michigan strategy. They wanted to win Michigan so bad. They ignored the Jewish community. And what happened was Jewish Americans were not afforded the same rights as others. So they abandoned the Jewish community for politics. And I just feel offended by that. If the rule of law requires that the Jewish Americans are protected like all Americans and enjoy the same rights. So that's what I meant. When I came here, the goal was to use the arsenal, every tool in the toolbox, to tell these haters we're not going to tolerate anti-Semitism, and we're going to send you to jail. We're going to cost you a lot of money. We're going to revoke your license. We're going to take away your tax privileges. So that's what the Biden administration should have done, but they did nothing. Not some things, nothing.
You know, what you said is so important, because before you came along, before you brought to bear the massive resources of the United States government, which are like no other, you know, the fight against anti-Semitism was this kind of touchy-feely, you know, we'll try to win the hearts and minds of these anti-Semites. I spoke out about this, you know, during the Biden administration. I said, what hearts and minds are you going to win? These people don't have hearts and they don't have minds. I mean, what are you actually trying to do? You think you're going to get anti-Semites to go in and watch Schindler's List or go to the Holocaust Museum? It's never going to happen. That's not the way you fight anti-Semitism. You come along, right? You come along like a bulldozer, but a breath of fresh air, and you're saying, you know what? I'm not gonna try to convince you. I'm gonna punish you. I'm gonna deter you. I'm gonna create penalties. And boy, has that worked? Was that your approach? Is that how you came in and saw it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't reason with people who want to eliminate a protective class of people. They want to eliminate them. And how can you sit down and have a rational conversation with irrational people? How can you? It's impossible. You look at the world today. You look at what's going on in the Middle East. You look at what's going on in this country, and you have this look the other way approach. Where were the hate crime charges filed in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, when these schools were hijacked by these pro-Palestinian Hamas leaders at UCLA, which I'm embarrassed to tell you, Ambassador. I went to UCLA Law School, and that was an embarrassment. And this anti-Semitism is not just an East Coast thing. It's on the West Coast. It's throughout the entire country. And yet the Biden administration, the previous administration, did not use the tools on the state level, on the local level, and on the federal level to stop it. They could have. And they did. That's what the Trump administration is doing. We're taking no prisoners until they understand the rule of law. We are not going to bargain with people who are out to eliminate a class of people.
I want to read to you something that was said by a guy. I think you know him. I know him. His name is Ayal Jacobi. He was one of the students, right? He's a Penn student, really on the front lines of all this crazy stuff that's going on. And here's what he said about you. I just want to read it to you because I think it's just, I want the audience to hear this. He writes, the entire Jewish community owes Leo Terrell a massive thank you. Within weeks, Mr. Terrell has launched an anti-Semitism task force, opened investigations into 10 campuses, and has been speaking directly with Jewish students. He has unparalleled leadership and moral clarity. Now, this is a guy on the front lines who was, you know, getting beaten up left and right. I don't mean physically, but just, you know, he couldn't go to class without being attacked because he supports Israel, because he's Jewish. Do you understand the impact you have on these people, on these poor kids? By the way, my daughter went to Columbia, was there the last couple of years. I went to Columbia. You understand how we feel when we have somebody in the White House bringing to bear all the powers of the Department of Justice who's fighting for us. How does that make you feel? And do you understand how important you are to us?
Well, I'm asking you to stop saying it because I'll break down and start crying right now because, you know, Ambassador, every place I go, I had some students here yesterday and they say the same thing. I've been to memorials. People come up to me and say, thank you. You've done a great job. And it is so heartfelt. And it's just, I don't deserve it. I appreciate it. I want to do more. I just feel like that, and I want to share this with your viewers and listeners, is that there are people who don't have this fire in their belly, and that annoys me, and it just makes me work harder. And I can tell everyone watching your program, this is a 24/7 commitment, and I will not stop until I can do everything possible. And I cannot stress this, Ambassador, enough, that President Trump has given me the tools to work on this issue of anti-Semitism, and he has made it possible for me to flourish. So I want to thank the listeners and the viewers that are watching this, but President Trump deserves a massive amount of credit.
He does. And, you know, in the first term when I was ambassador to Israel, I used to say the same thing. I got a lot of credit for things that we did, moving the embassy and other pro-Israel initiatives, and it was always President Trump. He's special. Look, he is. If you get to know him, not everybody gets the privilege of knowing him. Although he's so transparent, I think most people really know he is exactly the way he appears in public. So there's, I think a lot of people do ultimately feel like they know him, but you know him well. I know him well. He's special. He cares about these things. He sees what's going on. He sees what's been happening to the Jewish people. He understands. He grew up in New York. He understands the community well. He understands that these are kids whose parents gave up everything they could to send them to good universities, to good colleges, and then he watches and sees how it's all turning the wrong way, and he cares. He really cares. I mean, he is in his heart, he feels, I think, not just for Jewish people, for anyone who's not getting a fair share of the American dream. He cares about it, and I couldn't agree with you more. And you're right. He gave, what he did for me, what he did for you. He created that runway, that opportunity. Of course, the credit, a lot of the credit goes to him. But as great as Donald Trump is, Donald Trump without Leo Terrell is still an unfulfilled promise. So, lots of credit to go around. Let's talk about let's talk a little bit more about anti-Semitism. This, but I think that there are people that make the argument that we don't hate Jews. We don't hate Jews. Nothing against Jews. We just don't like Israel. We're critical of Israel about how they're conducting the war. And when I hear that, I get very angry because, on October 8th, right? Israel had not even responded yet, to the war. They hadn't put a single soldier deployed, and yet these protests were out in massive amounts. People were protesting Israel, and in short order, right? Long before you even could assess Israel's response, in short order, the streets were full, and they all came out together, and they all had the same brand of tents, and they all had the same talking points, and they were all getting up and looking at their iPhones and giving the same speeches. This was a highly coordinated anti-Semitic agenda. It seemed to me, I don't know what you think, it seemed to me like there was a whole organized effort just waiting for the right moment to pounce. And when that war started, they jumped on the Jewish people, with full energy. Is that the way you saw it as well?
Absolutely. And let me just tell you right now, Ambassador, follow the money. It was so well organized in this country. Now, I'm not going to hold back anything. I'm just going to tell you how I feel. Yes, it was well organized. And what bothers me, it's been validated by these university professors, by the media. I don't want to embarrass any media. CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post. They are apologists for this anti-Semitic conduct. They validated and have made it popular by attacking Jewish Americans. And this is what I find so amazing. I'm an old guy, and I have never seen anti-Semitism as horrific ever in my lifetime. I was a school teacher, Ambassador. I taught U.S. history. I taught about World War II, but I wasn't alive at that time. But in my lifetime, never have I seen anti-Semitism in this country, across the country, as horrific as it is right now. And it continues because of the cooperation and the assistance of mainstream media, the hijacking of our colleges, and the money that has been used in this country to spread this hate. We have an obligation to neutralize this propaganda, this constant barrage of hate that's being put upon Americans every day. And this is why the Trump administration is so critical to bring this to a screeching halt. And I got news for you. We got a lot to do. I got to bring this up too, because we're fighting this battle. Not only are we fighting this hate, we're fighting the elements of anti-Semitism, such as the Jewish tax. What is the Jewish tax? It's the cost of Jewish Americans to go to school, to go to their synagogue, the cost of security, to live in this country. No other group pays this Jewish tax. I've been at war with the mayor of this city, Washington, D.C. I've been at war with organizations and with local officials that have charged this Jewish tax that make it difficult for Jewish Americans to enjoy the fruits of this great country, the liberty and justice that they are entitled to.
And you know what? You're the only one who can do it. I mean, you writ large, the U.S. government. I mean, look, we've had organizations, NGOs that have been committed to fighting anti-Semitism for 100 years, right? We've got, I don't want to pick on any of them, but we all know who they are. They can't do any of this, right? I mean, they have not been they were unable to see this coming, and they were unable to stop it. And I don't want to blame them because it's a tsunami. I mean, it's something that I don't think any of us, as you point out, I mean, we're about the same age. I also haven't seen anti-Semitism of this magnitude in my lifetime. But all these organizations with all their budgets, and some of them have got, decent sized budgets, they can't stop it. It's only the ability to access law enforcement, to follow the money, as you say, to impose penalties. Look, would Columbia University care what the ADL has to say? No, they couldn't care less, right? They don't care what the American Jewish community says. Couldn't care less. You guys come along, and all of a sudden, there's a consequence to them perpetuating anti-Semitism. They talk to you, and you're making I know you made a deal with Columbia. I guess you're still in negotiations with Harvard. You're talking to UCLA. I mean, you got a whole a laundry list of universities that you're going to have to ultimately make deals with. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the key here is these deals have to be, I want them to be perfect. I want to make sure, Ambassador, that in the upcoming semester, Jewish American kids can walk on their campus without being intimidated, without being blocked. So we have these deals in place, but I got my fingers crossed because the test is going to be the fall semester. Have we incorporated, have we put in place deterrent mechanism in place to stop this hate that existed on these campuses? Have these Columbias, Harvard, UCLA, have they gotten the message? We're not going to tolerate it, because if it occurs, we're going to go in there with every tool to enforce the safety and protection of Jewish Americans. I have my doubts because, again, the opposition is well-financed. They have hijacked the college system. And, Ambassador, my biggest concern now is K-12, the propaganda, the hatred, what's in the curriculum of anti-Semitic conduct, the lesson plans. I mean, we are fighting a major war to fight against anti-Semitism.
Yeah. And the one thing that you really can't control, unfortunately, is the media. I mean, there's only limits to how much the U.S. government can control the media. You saw this past week how New York Times ran a front page picture of an emaciated kid, and they claimed it was because he was starving. They cut the picture because right to the side was his sibling, was his brother, who was perfectly healthy, perfect size and weight. And this poor kid was starving, but not because he had a congenital disease, not because of anything Israel was doing. Now, fast forward 2 days later, and Hamas puts out videos of two horribly emaciated Israelis, both living in airless tunnels, one being forced to dig a grave that he thinks he's going to be buried in. You didn't see that, on the front page of the New York Times. What do we do about the media? I mean, there's only so many Newsmaxes, Fox Newses, you can't do much legally, but I think you can tell a story, though. You can keep, getting the story out.
That's an excellent question. And I hope all the listeners and viewers take heart to this. We got to do a better job of combating hate and ugly speech. We live in a great country, the First Amendment. We can't force media to portray the truth. They portrayed their own version of the truth. What the New York Times did was horrific. And they did a retraction, which was on the back page. They try to hide the retraction. But here's the strategy. And I have 4 different social media accounts. My accounts are dedicated to activism to eliminate anti-Semitism. But we have to do a better job. We don't do a good job in promoting and pushing the agenda to combat anti-Semitism. We got to do a better job in the media because we're being, in my opinion, beaten in the public relations war. And the truth and the facts and the justice is on our side. We got the government on our side now. We got to do a better job in the media.
Well, look, you got 27 Democratic senators voting this past week to withhold assistance to Israel at its most severe time of crisis in years. You have three traditional allies of Israel, Canada, UK, and France, that claim they're going to recognize a Palestinian state, which will, of course, be a terror state, that as a reward for Hamas. As a result of all of that, Hamas has ended its negotiations with Israel and with America, with Steve Witkoff, with regard to the hostages. I mean, these are people, and they're not stupid people. I mean, the prime ministers of France, UK, and Canada, they're not dumb. The 27 senators and Democratic senators, they're not dumb. They have the same information that you and I have. They know that Israel is doing everything it can to avoid civilian casualties and doing everything they can to bring in food into the Gaza Strip. But the politics are such that they're taking it in the other way. They're doing exactly what you accuse Biden of doing, but even worse, of abandoning the Jewish people for politics.
Well, let me respond to that. You're absolutely correct. Of the 27 Democrats, I don't, thank God I left the Democrat Party, because the Democratic Party has become a party that has turned its back on Israel and have allowed anti-Semitism to flourish. That's not the Democrat Party I grew up with, Ambassador. This Democratic Party has changed. And this issue of fighting anti-Semitism is a bipartisan issue. It should be a bipartisan issue. It's the protective class status of Jewish Americans who have the same rights afforded to them as any other group under the Constitution. With regard to these countries, UK and France and Canada, you know what? They may be sorry in the long run, because those countries, especially France and UK, they have been hijacked and they're looking the other way. They don't know what's happening. This war on Jews is a war on American and Western civilization. Hello, Canada. Hello, UK. Hello, France. You better wake up and realize what you're endorsing.
Yeah, listen, it may be too late. I mean, I've referred to them as, certainly France and UK, as failed states. I mean, there are places. I mean, I've been there recently. Not good. I mean, you've got towns that neither you nor I could walk in. We couldn't walk into them. I mean, they claim to be governed by Sharia law. I would say that 90% of the mayors throughout the UK are Muslim, and many of them are radical Islamists. And nothing against Muslims, but radical Islamists are certainly anti-Semitic and want to take over all of our lives. So there may not be any hope for them. And history tells us that countries that turn on the Jews don't last very long. I mean, they tend to they tend to enter the dustbin of history, as they say. You haven't just been a supporter of Jewish people and their safety at home, but you've also been a tremendous supporter of Israel and of Prime Minister Netanyahu, which again is deeply appreciated. It seems to me it's just about taking the time to just understand the facts, to understand who's right. It's not complicated here, who's right and who's wrong. Israel didn't start this war. Israel goes out of its way. There's an academic at West Point named John Spencer, who you may know, who's the head of urban warfare at West Point, and studied the war and said no country in history has done more to avoid civilian casualties. And nobody cries over there were a lot more Germans that died in World War II than Brits and Americans. Nobody says that therefore the Germans were right because they lost more lives. I mean, we hope the bad guys lose more lives. We hope that they're defeated. That's the goal of a war, is to defeat the enemy, especially when it's an evil enemy. Why is this such a hard sell? It seems that, and even people in the Jewish community right now, I mean, I would say probably half the Jewish community is embarrassed for Israel, doesn't want to stand up for them. How do we get to this point? The morals here are not that complicated.
They're not. And those Jews in Israel, those Jews who stand up for or are in opposition to what's happening in Hamas or happening in the Gaza Strip is amazing. This is a issue that everyone should be on board with. But yet there are Jewish Americans who are silent. I don't understand it. But, I know we live in this great country and people have the right to think the way they want to, but this is an issue about the destruction and the annihilation of a free, democratic country such as Israel, a friend of America, and yet everyone's not in unison. Again, it goes back to that propaganda, the image that has been given by this public relation machine that has basically distorted the truth. It is very simple. Israel did not attack Gaza, did not attack Hamas. And what's holding a resolution? Israel's dedication and commitment to bring back the hostages, the ones that are alive and the ones that are deceased, and yet Hamas plays games. And yet they're defended by the media and by these countries such as UK and France. I don't understand it. But it doesn't clog my memory. I know what I have to do. I know what the president has to do. It's a PR war that we're fighting in addition to a military war, Ambassador, in the Middle East.
And no one's been better than the president about this. He knows exactly what Israel is dealing with. He understands. He understands it's not just Hamas. Look, you have the Palestinian Authority continues to have a pay for slave program. They continue to pay terrorists to murder Jews. I mean, it's not like Israel is living in this Shangri-La, peaceful area without problem. I mean, they are fighting a war now on 7 fronts. Now they've performed magnificently, and people say, well, why haven't you finished Hamas? You killed off Hezbollah. You've killed off the enemies in Syria. Why? Well, because when Israel left Gaza, and the world gave, first of all, the people there elected Hamas, gave them billions of dollars, and they built this web of 500 miles of underground, terror tunnels. It's not easy. I mean, every time, Israelis go in there, people unfortunately die because these people pop up. They pop up out of a tunnel. They shoot off an RPG. They go back in their tunnels again. And somehow Israel's being blamed for trying to eradicate Hamas. And I just want to ask you about this because people say, well, you can't defeat an idea. Hamas is an idea. And I'm thinking to myself, can you imagine if we felt that way in World War II? I mean, Nazism was an idea as well. Can you imagine if we said, look, we're going to leave Germany with Nazis in control because you really can't defeat an idea? I mean, that's how soft the world has become in terms of fighting evil.
Well, I agree with you 100%. Let's not also forget that Israel has to defend itself every night because there's air raids every night. So they're fighting a 2-front war. They're fighting Hamas and they're fighting the bombs that are coming into Israel every night. In addition, let's not excuse the misconduct of the United Nations and the United Nations Relief Fund. There's plenty of supplies, but the United Nations and the Red Cross and all these organizations that give this lying image of trying to save those who are starving. They're not friends. They're not friends of Israel. They're not friends of America, and they're playing both sides. And I find this so offensive. Israel is fighting everyone but the United States for its existence. And that is, thank God for America. Thank God for President Trump. Thank God that there's a great relationship between Netanyahu and President Trump. I've been privileged to know both men. I've been privileged to be in that Oval Office when they're talking about saving Israel, eliminating anti-Semitism. I've been blessed to be part of this attempt to solve this problem. And I can tell you this, Ambassador, the problem is going to be solved. Israel is going to survive. Israel is always going to survive. The Jewish people are strong. They're not going away at all. And I'll tell you right now, I'm just so happy to be part of this historical moment.
Well, it's historical. It's very much in your corner, along with the president and a few others. I believe in God. I believe God will protect Israel no matter what. But God acts through his messengers on earth. I think you and President Trump and a few others are indeed, God's messengers. You tweeted out something yesterday, which I noticed, which I, again, you and I are in such agreement on everything. We're not going to find anything to argue about, but Speaker Mike Johnson, who's a great lover of Israel, yesterday he did something that no Speaker of the House has ever done before. He went to visit the town of Ariel. Now, when I was ambassador, I broke that ground. No ambassador had ever been, anywhere in Judea and Samaria before I came along, and now we've kind of broken that. But no Speaker of the House had ever been to a city, especially one as large as Ariel. And you applauded that, and I think that, I think that when it's not just Ariel, but when people don't understand that this area that people refer to as the West Bank, this is biblical Israel. These are places that have enormous significance to Jews and Christians alike, whether it's places like Hebron, which Abraham purchased, or Bethel, where Jacob had his famous dream, or Shiloh, where the tabernacle, or Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, and where King David was born. Could you imagine if these places were given to the Palestinians away from Israeli sovereignty? They'd be destroyed. We would lose, Jews and Christians alike would lose their entire biblical antiquity, all connections to the Bible. In contrast, now you go to Israel, whether you're a Jew or a Christian, you can actually walk the footsteps of Jesus. You can walk the footsteps of King David. You can recharge your batteries and understand that the Bible is not a myth, that the Bible really happened. All these events really took place, and the proof is there. And the whole world, other than the United States, says, give it to the Palestinians, let them make a state, let them destroy any connection to the Jewish people or the Christian faith. Why are we even fighting this fight? But we're fighting it every day.
Because it's politics, and they don't understand the historical, biblical impact of these areas. And this is why I think this war in Gaza has to come to an end. It has to be resolved. And I think we have unity with the president and the prime minister as to ending this war. It's going to be painful. It's going to be difficult. Expect a barrage of criticism, but it has to be done. Israel must remain in control of these lands, and these lands must remain in Israel control, or else there'll be no Israel. And yet that's not going to happen.
Well, I'm watching, people who, seem to, know this area. A guy like Dennis Ross, who was, he and I have been debating over this, as well informed a guy as you can get. And he says, I hope that Israel doesn't take over Gaza. Well, what's the choice? I mean, Israel will retreat to the border, and then Hamas will stay in control, and we'll just go back to another October 7th. Maybe in a year or two, we'll have another October 7th. It's not like anybody else is rushing, to help Israel. It's not like this is like during the Syrian civil war, where other Arab nations took in, millions of refugees. The Arab world, especially the neighbors, they want Israel to choke on Gaza. So what is Israel's choice other than to take it over and to clean it out? I mean, there's a concept that we haven't really thought about since World War II. It's called winning a war, not just getting a ceasefire, actually winning, because when you win the war, you're then in a position to actually, revitalize the relationships like we did with Germany and with Japan. Nobody wants Israel to win the war. President Trump, I think, understands why that's an imperative.
I think you're 100% right. And that's why, saying it out loud, Israel has to win the war. And you can only win the war by taking over Gaza, starting anew, just like Japan 1945 in August, and just like in Germany in May of 1945. There has to be an occupation and start anew. Hamas cannot exist.
Yeah.
Cannot exist, period. Oh, may I have to put this on, because I did something.
I was just going to ask you about.
Because
I was just
Go ahead. You go ahead, Ambassador. I apologize.
No, it's so funny that you just put on that hat, because literally it was the next thing that I was going to talk to you about, because I am so appreciative of what you've done to preserve to keep Hadar Goldin, in the news. Now, just my story, when I became ambassador, one of the first people I met was Leah Goldin, who I know now you have met and have become close with. And she told me her story, and she told me about her son Hadar, and how in 2014, after John Kerry claimed that he had negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, Hadar, got out of his tank, and Hamas violated the ceasefire, and they killed him. And to this day, they're still holding his remains. So Leah Goldin doesn't want to, she knows her son is gone, just wants his remains back to give him a decent funeral. And it's been 11 years, and she's going around the world fighting for her son. It is one of the most distressing, one of the saddest, frankly, one of those pathetic, examples of what Hamas does, of its cruelty, its barbarism, and just on this point, what I did was, Hadar, as you know, was an artist, an incredible artist. I asked Leah for one of his works. She gave me one of his paintings, and my first day in the ambassador's residence, I hung up Hadar's painting right as you walk in. So every single person from any walk of life who walked into the residence, I was able to raise the consciousness of Hadar's. And now, Biden for 4 years, nothing, not a word. Nobody cared. And then I see you, wearing a Hadar Goldin hat. I had it on my list. I was going to ask you about that next. Tell me about your experience with the efforts to repatriate the remains of Hadar.
I want to thank you very much for what you have done for Leah and the family. And I want to apologize to the Goldin family because I broke my rule. I made it a goal when I do any TV, any appearances, I wear this hat. And I need to thank my chief of staff for reminding me, where's your hat? But let me tell you, I had the privilege, Ambassador, to have Leah in my office, in this office, the privilege to have her son and Hadar's twin brother. And I said that I would make a pledge to make sure that Hadar Goldin's name is remembered and for me to tell the story. You told the story. He's been in captivity, his remains, since 2014. A mother has the right to bury her son, and he's one of the 50. And what I find offensive, again, you talk about Hamas holding the remains of Hadar Goldin in captivity for over 11 years, and along with the other 50 hostages. I've had hostages here in my office. This is the type of monstrous act of Hamas. So my goal in this very small way of showing that America cares about returning the 50 hostages and Hadar. And my goal is to keep this hat on. And I apologize to Leah and the family because I did have it on for the entire program. I just honestly escaped my mind. But my goal is to make sure the world knows that Hamas is holding Hadar Goldin and 50 other hostages in captivity.
Back in, I think it was probably 2019, a very well-known, high-ranking international diplomat came to see me and said to me that, Hamas wanted to establish contacts, with America in some way, maybe below the surface. And I said, look, we'll never do that. They're a designated terrorist organization. You wanna do something on the right foot? Real simple. Return the remains of Hadar Goldin. Just do that. I'm not promising you're not gonna get anything for it. You want to show that you have an ounce of humanity, just something, some respect for human suffering. Release the remains of Hadar to his parents, and I guarantee you'll be in a better position. And they said, no way, we'll never do. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. This is the cruelty. This is the willingness to bargain for things that should never be bargained. This should never be a bargaining point. Some poor mother has to bargain to get her remains of her son back. I mean, it's horrible. And thank you, because no one else, including me, as much as I care about, no one else has ever thought of wearing a hat with his name on it to raise the consciousness. I have no doubt that Leah is and her and Hadar's entire family are deeply grateful. By the way, the other Israeli soldier who was killed with Hadar, Oren Shaul, his remains were already returned, right? From with these, so it's just Hadar now, and whoever's listening, whatever you can to raise the consciousness of this poor family, to help them make the case. It's a mitzvah. It's a hugely important thing. Let's go back a little bit, with the few minutes we have left, to anti-Semitism. You say you're going to defeat it. If you defeat anti-Semitism in a meaningful way, you will have done something that hasn't been done in 3,500 years. I mean, let's. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but it's never been done. Tell us, you've already, taken on the universities. You've already criminalized behavior that has that in the past has not. You've already, working together with our great Secretary of State Marco Rubio and with Stephen Miller and others. You've started to move these Jew haters out of the country where they weren't American citizens. What's the program look like going forward? It's only been 6 months. It feels like a couple of years already. It's only been 6 months. How does this process continue?
We have to expand the message across the entire country. We get so caught up, Ambassador, on the East Coast, but this problem of anti-Semitism is in the Midwest. It's on the West Coast. It's up in Oregon. It's in Washington. So I'm taking this my A team across the country and making sure this message is heard in these universities, because we have been hearing from them of the problems, the anti-Semitism across this entire country. So the key here is to get the federal government unified. There are U.S. attorneys who are asking me, what can we do? What can we do? And they're asking me this question across the board to eliminate anti-Semitism. A lot of individuals don't even know how to address it, not only on the federal level, but on the local level, the state level. And then we got to fight those who resist it. And that means more litigation. It's a constant 24/7 obligation for the next 3.5 years. I'm committed. The president is committed. But we have to make sure the people between myself and the president are also committed. I don't want, if anyone gets Jewish fatigue, they got to be removed, because Jewish fatigue will slow down the process. And that exists. That exists in the government. I would be lying to you if I said otherwise. And so we have to avoid those individuals from being obstacles, because they exist. And I can assure you and the listeners, I'm not going to stop. The fire in my belly is a commitment, because I believe in civil rights. Again, we talked about it earlier. I remember the 60s. I know what the commitment is. The fundamental right of every American is to have the same rights as all Americans. Jewish Americans do not have that right now. It's my goal to make sure that happens.
Leo, when I was, I was a student at Columbia. I hate to admit it, but I was, and my brother went there, and my sister went to Barnard, and my grandfather went to Columbia, got a PhD there. I mean, and then my oldest son went to Columbia, and my daughter graduated recently from Columbia, and
wow.
And so I feel this very directly. The night before her organic chemistry final, she's living off campus with a bunch of kids, and they had already finished their finals, so they were all partying. So she had to get out. So she went to the library, and the night before her organic chemistry final, the Columbia guards would not let her on campus, would not let her in, because the violence had gotten so bad that you couldn't get on campus unless you lived in a campus dorm. So you can imagine that a student who wants to study for an exam can't get into the library of the school that she's attending. That's how bad it got. I don't think I'm hopeful that we're not going back to that point. But listen, you really have assembled a dream team. I mean, it starts, of course, with the president. We've got great people at all the key points. But it all flows into you, because it's your job. No one else has the job focused solely on fighting anti-Semitism. I can't think of a better person for the job. I can't think of someone more effective. I can't think of anybody who's done more in less time than Leo Terrell. And I want to bless you. I want to wish you all of God's blessings, to give you the strength, the courage, the stamina, because it's a grind. I mean, not every day is a win. The grind to keep this up, because you are truly doing the work of God. You will be blessed for generations along with your family. And I want to thank you for everything you've done. And thank you for being a guest on the show. I have no doubt that the audience of this podcast will be viral because of how interesting you are and how important your message is.
Ambassador, it has been a privilege. God bless you. God bless all your listeners and viewers. I could tell all of them, I'm going nowhere. I'm committed to this. It is what makes this country great. And I look forward to seeing you personally, to shake your hand and just sit down and say thank you for this opportunity to express how I feel about this goal of eliminating anti-Semitism. Again, thank you.
The great Leo Terrell. Thanks for watching, and look forward to the next episode of One Jewish State. Leo, thanks again. You're the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.